Tonight's service is about how in community we can do together what we could not do alone, how we can make the world a better place. And so I've got just the story for you about that. Desmond the mouse lived in the most beautiful meadow in all the land. Every morning, Desmond would wake with the sunrise and spend the whole day playing in the meadow. And every night, Desmond would go to sleep in the middle of that meadow under the beautiful starry sky. One night, though, Desmond awoke to find that it was still dark out. He tried to roll over, get more comfortable, and go back to sleep, but something wasn't right. He could hardly move, and his tail was throbbing with pain. Reaching behind him, he felt that there was some sort of huge boulder seemed to have fallen just on his tail in the middle of the meadow. He tried pushing on this giant rock behind him with all of his strength. And he tried tugging on his tail to get loose, tugging with all of his might. And he tried pushing and tugging and tugging and pushing, but it was no use. He was stuck. And when he was just about out of breath, though, he heard an animal passing by through the grass. He looked up and he saw a tall giraffe. And so he called out, "Oh, giraffe, it seems that some sort of boulder has fallen just on my tail in the middle of the meadow. If you could use your powerful legs to just nudge it a few inches in the other direction, I could go free." Well, the giraffe laughed at Desmond the way giraffes do. "You silly mouse," he said. "That's no boulder that's fallen on your tail. That is an elephant that's fallen asleep on your tail." Well, that seems maybe a little better, thought Desmond. In that case, if you could just gently wake him up and ask him to roll over even just a few inches in the other direction, I could get free. "I don't know about that," said the giraffe. "I mean, surely you know what they say about letting sleeping elephants lie. I find it's best not to get involved in other animals' business. I find it's best to remain neutral in times like this." Well, Desmond sighed, "I do not appreciate your neutrality." The giraffe wandered off, leaving Desmond alone. So he tried shouting to wake the giant elephant, but his little mouse voice, it was just too far away from those giant elephant ears at the way other end of that giant elephant body. Again, he tried pushing with all of his strength, and he tried tugging on his tail with all of his might, and he tried shouting and pushing and tugging and tugging and pushing and shouting. And when he had just about given up, he heard another animal pass by through the grass. It was a gazelle, and so he called out, "Oh, gazelle, it seems that an elephant has fallen asleep just on my tail in the middle of the meadow. If you could just gently wake him up and ask him to roll over just a few inches in the other direction, I could get free." "I don't know about that," said the gazelle. "Surely you know what they say about letting sleeping elephants lie. I find it's best not to get involved in other animals' business. I find it's best to remain neutral in times like this." The gazelle wandered off, and Desmond said, almost to himself this time, "I do not appreciate your neutrality." One final time, Desmond tried shouting with all of his voice. He tried pushing with all of his strength. He tried tugging with all of his might, and he tried shouting and pushing and tugging and tugging and pushing and shouting. And when he had just about given up for the last time, he saw another animal pass by. It was a mouse this time. And when he shouted out, the mouse ran over and introduced himself. He said, "My name is Nelson. What seems to be the problem?" Well, no sooner had Desmond explained this situation than Nelson ran all the way to the other end of that giant elephant body, and he shouted up to those giant elephant ears, "Excuse me! It seems you've fallen asleep on my friend's tail in the middle of the meadow. If you could roll over just a few inches in the other direction, he could go free." Well, the elephant heard Nelson's little mouse voice way down on the ground. But those big elephant ears were just too far away on top of that giant elephant head. And Nelson's voice was just a bit too small. And to be honest, the elephant was just a bit too comfortable. He didn't move. So Nelson thought for a minute, and then he had an idea. He ran back to Desmond and he said, I think I've got a plan. Don't move. And he ran off, leaving a confused look on Desmond's face, as you might imagine. And just when Desmond was starting to get worried again, he saw Nelson emerge back through the grass. But he wasn't alone this time. He had found 3 mouse friends, and each of them had found another 3 mouse friends. The whole group of them ran all the way to the other end of that giant elephant body, and one mouse climbed up on the shoulders of another, and another climbed up on her shoulders until they had a whole mouse ladder all the way up the back of that giant elephant head. And at last, Nelson climbed up the shoulders of his friends one by one, carefully, gently, and at last he stood right at the opening of that giant elephant ear. And he shouted with all of his voice, "Excuse me! It seems you've fallen asleep on my friend's tail in the middle of the meadow. Roll over just a few inches so he can go free." Well, his voice was too loud, too close to ignore this time. And so the elephant said, and he rolled over just a few inches in the other direction. Nelson and his friends climbed back down to the ground, and they met up with Desmond, and the whole lot of them spent the whole rest of that day playing together in the meadow. Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who passed away just a few months ago now, had said, "If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you are a liar, for you have already taken sides with the powerful and you've taken sides with the oppressor." He said, if an elephant stands on the tail of a mouse, the mouse will never appreciate your neutrality. Archbishop Tutu believed in a God who he said took sides. He believed in a God who he said took sides with the orphan and the widow and with the oppressed everywhere. As Unitarian Universalists, I don't necessarily believe in that God, but we have covenanted to build a world of justice and equity and compassion, and that means imagining a world very different from the one we see around us today. And so it means we come together in community to do together what we couldn't do alone, and that we come together to take sides for justice and to take sides for equity and compassion. And it means that we come together to side with love. May it be so. May we make it so.